I learned the hard way that success does not always bring unity. Sometimes it brings out the worst in the people who share your bloodline. And for me, that truth revealed itself in a quiet, coastal town in Vancouver, where my family had built a humble fishing supply shop that barely survived the winters. My name is Lena Hart, and for 12 years, I poured everything I had into a business everyone else had long given up on. But before I go any further, if you're listening right now, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because what you're about to hear is something too many people go through in silence, and I don't want you to feel alone the way I once did. Back to my story. My father founded Hart Marine and Tools when he was barely 22. Back then, it was the pride of our family. But decades later, when the fishing industry started collapsing in our region, the shop became a sinking ship no one wanted to rescue, except me. My older brother Evan was supposed to inherit the business. He was the golden child, the responsible one, the smart one, the one my father always believed in. But when things got tough, Evan left, moved to Toronto, took an office job, built a life far from our family's struggles. And I stayed. I stayed through brutal storms, overdue bills, supply shortages, and the haunting fear that one day I'd unlock the shop door and find everything gone. I studied digital marketing at night. I taught myself e-commerce. I learned how to pitch to wholesalers. I rebuilt our website, grew a community online, launched new product lines, and slowly transformed the shop from a dying business into a growing one. But no matter how hard I worked, Dad still compared everything I did to Evan. Your brother would have done it differently. Evan always knew how to manage money. Maybe Evan will come help us soon. Those words never left me. They carved something deep inside me that made me push even harder. By year 8, we had expanded into selling tech-enhanced fishing gear, modern navigation tools, and custom boat accessories. We shifted from a fading local shop into a rising online supplier that served clients across Canada and northern US. And for the first time, Dad looked at the numbers, looked at the growth, and finally gave me a smile I had craved for years. Maybe you're not just playing around with ideas. You might actually know what you're doing. Those words meant everything to me then. If only I had known how quickly they would disappear. The turning point arrived on a cold autumn afternoon, the day Evan came home after being gone nearly a decade. He stepped into the shop wearing a sleek suit, expensive watch, and the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him space. "Wow," he said, scanning the renovated interior. "You've made a lot of changes." I waited, naive enough to expect gratitude. Instead, he smirked. "But you've also made a lot of mistakes. Good thing I'm back. Dad needs someone who actually understands business." Just like that, 10 years of sweat, sacrifice, and sleepless nights were dismissed in a single breath. Dad hugged Evan as if he were the returning savior. And before I knew it, evening turned into a family dinner where everything shifted. "I've decided," Dad announced proudly, "now that Evan is back, you two will run the business together. Co-directors. He'll handle strategy and finances. You'll stay on the technical side." My fork froze in midair. Co-directors. Strategy and finances his? My role? Technical only? The company I rebuilt was being split as if my work had no meaning, as if Evan's return automatically placed him above me. But I swallowed the sting and agreed, because I wanted peace, because I wanted Dad to be proud, because I didn't want another fight.
For the next 2 years, I worked harder than ever while Evan walked around giving speeches, meeting investors, and claiming credit for every improvement. He became the face of the brand. I became the quiet shadow holding everything together. When we hit our first 10 million in revenue, Evan celebrated like he had built the company brick by brick, dollar by dollar, client by client. But he hadn't. I had. And deep down, he knew it. Still, I tried to coexist with him, tried to believe we were building something together. But beneath it all, something darker brewed. Jealousy, entitlement, and a hunger for power that Evan hid behind charming smiles. Then came Dad's 70th birthday celebration, the night everything fractured beyond repair. Evan insisted on hosting it at a lavish lakeside resort. He said we needed a sophisticated atmosphere to reflect the sophisticated direction of the company. I arrived early to help, wearing a simple navy dress, comfortable, quiet, professional. Evan glanced at me and clicked his tongue. Couldn't you have chosen something more polished? We have important investors coming. I almost laughed. Investors I brought in, but never mind. I greeted guests while Evan floated from table to table, shaking hands, laughing, posing for photos. He was charming. He was magnetic. He was dangerous. During dinner, he tapped his glass, stood, and delivered a speech that began with praises and ended with betrayal so deep it left me breathless. As we celebrate our father today, he said, voice smooth as silk, I want to announce a few changes in the company. The room quieted. I felt the air shift. We've come a long way, but lately we've been held back by outdated decision-making and a lack of leadership discipline. His eyes locked on mine. And so, effective next quarter, I will be taking over as sole director of Hart Marine and Tools. I felt the world tilt. He continued, my sister Lena has done adequate work, but she lacks the experience required for where we're headed. She'll transition into a support role that better suits her skills. It's time for growth, for real leadership. Gasps spread. My chest tightened. Dad watched proudly, nodding. And just like that, 10 years of my life were erased in front of colleagues, partners, and family. But Evan forgot something. Something that would soon flip everything upside down. He forgot that the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, the ones they call adequate, we're the ones who know how to build. And more importantly, we're the ones who know how to take back what's ours. I didn't sleep that night. I sat alone in my small apartment above the shop, staring at the lake through the window as moonlight sliced across the surface. The humiliation replayed again and again. The whispers, the stares, the way Evan's voice dripped with condescension as he declared my demotion in front of everyone who'd watched me rebuild our dying business from dust. I kept hearing that one word he used, adequate. A decade of my life dismissed as adequate? I felt anger, yes. But beneath the anger was something deeper, something sharper, a realization. Evan was no leader. He was a performer, a collector of recognition, a master at claiming spaces he never earned. And Dad? He had been blinded, again, by the image of the son he always wanted, not the reality of the son he had. But as the sun began to rise, the storm inside me settled into something cold and resolute. Evan believed he had taken everything from me, but he had no idea what I truly held. Because while he had spent the past 2 years doing interviews, staging events, and taking glamorous photos for the company's website,
I had been doing the real work, the contracts, the product development, the financial restructuring, the client negotiations, the supplier relationships, the intellectual property filings, the back-end system management. And I knew something Evan did not know. The company was not built on speeches or handshakes. It was built on paperwork, and paperwork had a memory. That morning, I walked into the office before anyone arrived. The air smelled of fresh coffee and new shipments, an aroma I had always associated with hope. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the contract folders I had quietly updated over the years. Evan didn't understand the depth of what I had done, the systems I had created, the foundations I had put in place. He didn't understand that Hart Marine and Tools was not a simple shop anymore. It was a complex ecosystem of customized software, proprietary equipment, service agreements, and licensing partnerships. And he especially didn't understand how it was all structured. He thought he could simply take control. But the truth was, he didn't even know what he was trying to take. At 9 a.m. sharp, I heard footsteps outside the office. Evan's voice drifted in, smooth and confident. "Let's get started," he said. "I have a big transition plan to roll out." Transition plan. The irony nearly made me smile. I stood, smoothed my blouse, and prepared myself. Then I heard Dad's voice behind him. He'd come to. Of course he had. When they entered my office, they found me standing beside the meeting table, a stack of documents in front of me, the company dashboard glowing behind me. "Lena," Evan said, with an exaggerated sigh, "I'm glad you came in today. I wasn't sure whether you'd show your face after last night's misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. The arrogance of that word almost made me laugh. I didn't sit. I didn't greet them. I didn't smile. Before any transition can happen, there are things we need to clarify. Evan rolled his eyes. Dad looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "Lena," Dad began, gently, "let's avoid drama, all right?" Drama. That was the word he always used when I defended myself. No drama. Just facts. I tapped the screen. A chart flashed up. Ownership structure. Evan's eyebrows knitted. Dad blinked. "Let's start with something simple. A piece of information you both seem to have forgotten." I clicked the next slide. Lena Hart, 52% ownership. Evan Hart, 24%. Martin Hart, 24%. Evan's jaw clenched. "That's wrong," he snapped. "I would have known." "No," I cut in, my voice steady. "No, you wouldn't. Because 4 years ago, when you were living across the country, Dad sold me 16% of his shares during our expansion crisis. He needed cash fast. I provided it. In exchange, he signed the transfer papers." Dad swallowed hard, looking at the floor. Evan turned to him, stunned. "You gave her majority ownership?" he hissed. Dad hesitated. I didn't think it mattered at the time." Evan's face went pale with rage. But I wasn't finished. "Ownership aside, there's another detail you should probably know." I tapped the next file open. Hart Navigator Pro, intellectual property owner, L. Hart. Hart Guide mobile app, owner, L. Hart. Ocean Link distribution software, owner, L. Hart. Evan blinked rapidly. "What is this?" "These," I said, "are the core digital systems that power our operations. The software that processes our orders, manages our shipping, handles our inventory, tracks our markets. Not owned by the business, owned by me." "You're lying," Evan spat. I pressed another button. Legal filings flashed across the screen. Government seals, dates, digital signatures.
Everything is legally registered under my name. The company only has a licensing agreement, and that licensing agreement, I paused, expires in 9 days. Dad slumped into a chair. Evan's mouth dropped open. Without renewal, I continued, the company loses access to all its digital infrastructure. It would shut down within 48 hours. Evan slammed his hand on the table. You planned this. You planned this from the start. I shook my head slowly. No, Evan. I spent years trying to work with you, trying to keep the business alive, trying to salvage whatever family we had left. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. But you tried to humiliate me in front of every investor, every partner, every employee. You tried to force me out of my own creation. I opened another folder. This time, a series of emails. Last night, I said, I informed our major partners of the leadership announcement. Evan snatched one of the papers from the table and scanned it. His face drained of color. They're pulling out, he whispered. All of them. Yes, I said. Because they signed personal loyalty clauses. Because they trusted me. Not you, not Dad, me. Evan staggered backward, dazed. Dad rubbed his forehead with shaking hands. Through the glass walls, I saw employees gathering outside, checking their phones, whispers spreading like wildfire. It was happening. Everything Evan feared. Everything he brought upon himself. I walked to the table slowly and placed 2 documents down. Now, I said, here are your options. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. Option 1, I walk away with my software, my clients, my systems, and my ownership stake. Hart Marine & Tools becomes nothing more than a name. Dad's breath caught. Or, option 2, I said calmly. You both resign from management. You keep your shares as silent partners. You receive dividends, but you have no authority. The room went silent. Evan stared at the papers. Dad looked shattered. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in their presence. I felt equal. I felt seen. I felt powerful. But mostly, I felt done being underestimated. The room stayed silent for a long time. Long enough for my pulse to settle, long enough for Evan's ego to deflate, long enough for Dad to finally see the consequences of every choice he had made over the past decade. I didn't rush them. I didn't fill the space with explanations or apologies the way I used to. I simply stood there, centered and steady, letting the weight of reality sink into the 2 men who had never taken me seriously until that very moment. Evan's face shifted through stages: rage, disbelief, denial, panic. Dad's face, though, was something else entirely. It carried a sadness I had never seen before, a regret, a slow unraveling of the myth he had spent a lifetime believing, the myth that his son was the natural leader, the rightful heir, the one destined to take the family legacy further. But myths crumble when confronted with facts, and the facts were right there on the screen behind me. Legal documents, intellectual property filings, ownership charts, client letters, all bearing one name: Lena Hart. Finally, after what felt like an entire year condensed into a few minutes, Evan lifted his head. This is blackmail, he said weakly. No, I replied calmly. This is accountability. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Perhaps for the first time in our lives, he had nothing to say. Dad rubbed his temples. His voice, when it finally came out, was hoarse. Lena, did it really have to come to this?
I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who raised me, who taught me how to splice fishing line and fix broken engines. At the man who taught me to be strong, but seemed always surprised when I actually was. Yes, I said softly, because you both gave me no choice. Dad flinched. If I had let last night's announcement stand, I continued, all my work, all my sacrifice, everything I built would have been erased. You made a public decision that dismissed me as if I were temporary, like I was replaceable, disposable. Evan scoffed. We didn't say disposable. Evan, I cut in sharply. You called me adequate. He looked away, ashamed. Dad let out a long, weary breath. I just thought maybe working together would bring the family closer. I shook my head slowly. No, you thought putting Evan above me again would make things feel familiar, comfortable, orderly. I paused. But you never considered what it cost me every time you did that. Dad closed his eyes. I tapped the documents on the table. These are the consequences of ignoring the person who carried this business on her back for years. Not because I wanted to win anything, not because I wanted power, but because every time I needed support, you both left me standing alone. Evan swallowed hard. So, I said gently but firmly, what's it gonna be? They knew there wasn't really a choice, not if they wanted the business to survive, not if they wanted to hold on to any piece of the legacy they'd been so obsessed with guarding. It took another hour, a painful, messy hour, filled with lawyers, signatures, tense silences, and unspoken truths. But by noon, it was done. Dad resigned from operational management. Evan signed his severance agreement and partnership limitations, his hand trembling the entire time. I signed my own set of documents, ones that named me the sole director and executive of Hart Marine and Tools. Then, everyone left. The office door clicked shut behind the last person, and I sank into the leather chair, my chair, feeling both victorious and hollow at the same time. The city skyline stretched out in front of me, glittering under the midday sun. This was everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, everything I had been denied for so long. And yet, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like loss. A necessary loss, but a loss nevertheless. Because even though I had won, I had also destroyed whatever fragile threads were left holding our family together. I sat there for almost an hour, breathing, letting the fullness of the moment settle into my bones. Later that evening, as the sky darkened, there was a soft knock on my office door. It was my mother. She stood there clutching a small thermos with tea, her eyes red, her face tired. I knew she had spent the day consoling Dad, absorbing the emotional wreckage Evan left behind, and probably crying in between. Without a word, she came in and sat across from me. Did it really have to go this way? She asked quietly, voice trembling. I looked down at my hands. They pushed me into a corner, I said softly, and they expected me to stay small in that corner, just like always. She nodded slowly. I know, she whispered. She reached across the table and placed her hand gently over mine. I'm proud of you, Lena. Truly. I wish the price hadn't been so high. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and for the first time that day, my chest tightened in a way I couldn't hide. I wish that too, I admitted. We talked for a long time. Not about business or shares or contracts, but about family, about the years of tension, about the favoritism I had carried like a silent wound, about the expectations placed on Evan that crushed him into arrogance, about the expectations placed on me that forged me into steel. And when she finally stood to leave, she kissed my forehead the same way she used to when I was a child. "I hope," she whispered, "that someday your father understands what he almost lost." Over the next year, Hart Marine and Tools experienced more growth than it had in the previous decade. Without the strain of someone trying to undermine me, I flourished. The company flourished. We expanded into new territories, launched innovative tools, built strategic partnerships, and tripled our annual revenue. People who once ignored me now sought my advice. People who once doubted me now quoted my strategies. Meanwhile, Evan moved to California and took a lower-level job at a tech supply startup. Humbled, quieter, carrying the weight of his choices. We exchanged polite messages on holidays. Nothing more. Dad retired permanently. We still saw each other, but the warmth had changed. The closeness was dusted with a thin layer of unspoken grief. Grief for the daughter he had underestimated, and grief for the son he had overestimated. Sometimes, late at night, I would stare at the wall in my office where I had hung a photo of our original shop. A tiny, cluttered space with peeling blue paint and a rusty sign. That photo reminded me of who I was before everything happened. Before betrayal, before power, before I discovered what I was truly capable of. Some nights, I would take out a small box I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside that box was a wrapped birthday gift, one I had meant to give Dad the night Evan tried to strip me of my role. It was a photo album I had spent weeks putting together. Pictures of our family through the years, pictures of the shop, pictures of all the stages of growth, the highs, the lows, the renaming, the expansion, the rebranding. I never gave it to him. I didn't know if I ever would. But I kept it because despite everything, I still believed that one day, when the wounds weren't so fresh, when he could finally see beyond his old narratives, I might hand it to him and say, "This is all of us. Not just the son you adored, not just the daughter you overlooked, but a family that struggled, broke, rebuilt, and somehow survived." I'm not sure when that day will come, but I do know one thing. Being underestimated shaped me. Being dismissed sharpened me. Being pushed aside awakened me. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that carried me forward. It was clarity. Clarity of who I am, clarity of what I bring to the table, clarity of the power of resilience. These days, when I attend industry events, I hear people whisper, "That's Lena Hart." They never finish the sentence, but they don't have to. My work speaks loudly enough. And as I stand here today, sharing this story with you, I want you to remember something. Sometimes, the people who underestimate you the most are the ones closest to you. And sometimes, the person everyone assumes is the weakest is the one who ends up changing everything. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story touched you in any way, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment with your perspective or the key lessons you learned. Your voice matters here, and your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them the most.